Hello, Sleuth. My name is Ave. This is Cara Bear, and welcome to the video channel for Cara Bear Comics. It's another character introductions video, this time the last character introductions video, as I've mentioned on my previous ones. If this is your first video on the channel, I actually really recommend the Almighty Protector's character introductions video as the big one, because going forward on my channel, a lot of stories I'm going to do and a lot of art I'm going to do is going to involve the Protectors. It may also involve other characters that I've done in these character introductions, and just others entirely, but it'll definitely have the Protectors. The first story is definitely going to be the Protectors. But this one is about basically the other characters, the ones that aren't associated with any particular team. Now, I do know that right down there, you see that I put down the Broken. And it's just like, isn't that a team? It's like, not necessarily. The Broken is just the label I use, the title I use for two of the characters. The first two characters I'm going to put here for their story. They're intrinsically entwined. And so I figured, I may as well have it be the Broken and others, because none of the rest have any particular group name of any sort. There is a team of sorts, but they don't have a name, so it would have been kind of hard. But yeah, these are ones done for the Pride High message boards, for the Deviant Universe and the Vigilance Project, which was a spin-off of the Deviant Universe, as well as one more character that is not associated with either of those. I was going to do also one I submitted to the Myriad anthology on DeviantArt, but the problem with that is, well, I've never used the character. Am I sure this is stable? So I think the video, I don't know, I'm probably tipped. But yeah, that last character, I haven't actually done any stories in the Myriad anthology, and it seems like I probably never will. So I'll probably be introducing that character more in one of the stories here or in one of my comics. But since I haven't done anything with her, I have plenty of heroes I've not mentioned in these things because they're secondary characters. Why would I include a character that I haven't even done anything with yet? But as it stands, let's get right on back behind me, where my drawing table is. You can see the little light there and stuff, because I'm usually in front of that. But and get to seeing me drawing these characters. First up is Split. Real name Amber Seas. Pronouns are she, her. Amber is a bisexual trans teenager of Persian descent. She never knew her parents, adopted as a baby by a Caucasian family due to her mother dying during childbirth, not even knowing her actual racial background. At 10 years old, she was in a car accident that took the life of her 12-year-old brother, George. Afterwards, a seemingly alternate personality emerged in Amber's psyche, claiming to be George. He believed that Amber was the one who had died, and she had stolen his body and somehow tricked everyone into thinking he was the dead one. And he was the one who gave her a buzz cut and dyed her hair red in order to better look how he did before. Mental health personnel believed this to be a product of trauma, a way for Amber to cope with the death of a loved one. However, nobody could explain why Amber, when George was in control, possessed the same superpower that George had manifested in life, and also knew things that only he would know. Amber's world was one in which superheroes were established, and there were private schools for powered children to go to in order to train to use them properly, as well as steer them toward a superhero career. Amber's father already wanted to send her to the prestigious Bay Area superhero high school after George, through Amber, showed the signs of a power, but when she came out to him, he insisted, feeling that it being a private school would mean a stricter upbringing that would turn her cis and straight. Luckily for Amber, the school was accepting and, as it was also a boarding school, arranged to let her dress how she wanted without her parents knowing. On her first day, Amber met Vince, who you'll see later, and the two became fast friends and both nurtured crushes for the other that they thought was unrequited. A bit of the ways through the school year, the true nature of Amber's power was revealed, and at the same time her trans status was also revealed to the student body, and word made its way to her parents. Her dad came to pull her out of school, but intervention by her fellow classmates helped him to understand that he was in the wrong, and in the process George finally realized the truth of his own death. In the time since, Amber and Vince eventually realized their true feelings for each other and started dating. Amber has the power to trap the souls of the recently deceased in her own psyche, where they manifest as alternate personalities, keeping the same powers and skills they had in life, though channeled through the limitations of Amber's slender frame, as Amber doesn't physically change when a personality takes control. The personalities can talk to the host body through reflective surfaces, something that can only be observed by Amber or those with psychic powers. It's also been shown that Amber has the ability to rip a soul from a living body, but doesn't want to develop this. It's something that is both horrific to her and also causes her extreme stress in the process, and the soul being taken will fight hard to stay in its original body. Not comfortable with her power, Amber prefers the idea of combat to be hand-to-hand, and has been practicing Tai Chi for years. George, meanwhile, doesn't have any hand-to-hand fighting abilities and instead relies on his power of hydromancy for many things. He's quite adept at it, and while he can't create water, he can take it from the air, or as he's demonstrated before, from a person's body. An item he keeps on him at all times is a squirt gun to facilitate his power, and that is something that is holstered on Amber's belt. Amber is painfully inobservant, shy, and unable to look people in the eye. Her larger vocabulary and better than average grades make people think she's smarter than she really is. George, meanwhile, is an extrovert and opinionated. He lets Amber be in control for classes, so his education is mainly still at a middle school level. Split was actually inspired by the TV show Heroes. As I was watching season 1, before it was revealed what was going on with the character, I theorized that the character of Nikki had this sort of power. When it was revealed she didn't, I decided to make someone who did. And here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. Now we are on to Protean, real name Vince Croce, pronouns are he, him. Vince is a mostly Caucasian, cis, straight teenage boy. His family is no stranger to superheroes, as his dad was one, and his older brother Grant graduated from the superhero prep school the year before Vince started there. Every powered member of the family has some sort of ability to transform into mythological beasts, as his father could turn into any mythological creature and Grant can become a dragon, but can also have a half-dragon form he prefers. Vince thinks his brother's codename Dragrant is ridiculous and will tell him that on every chance he gets. Vince's power, meanwhile, lets him turn into mythological creatures as well, but only so long as they're not humanoid. Therefore, he can't become a centaur, merman, cyclops, ogre, or the like, but can turn into a pegasus, griffin, manticore, or the like. The longer he stays in these forms, the more he begins to take on their mannerisms, and these can linger for a bit when he goes back to being human. Because of this, he prefers the more gentle forms, and seems to prefer cat-like ones. One trait that lingers no matter what, though, is that his shoes are uncomfortable to him, preferring to feel the ground beneath him. Despite his strong family connections and near-guaranteed possibility of it, Vince has always felt detached due to the fact that he has schizophrenia. While he medicates himself for it diligently, there is still the social stigma that can come from it, and it has caused some peers to turn away from possible friendship. On his first day at school, Vince met Amber. The two hit it off despite their social awkwardness. His family seemed a bit concerned, though, when he didn't make any other close friends. He knew he should, but also knew that Amber's awkwardness meant that she would need him around for a lot, plus he liked spending time with her. She didn't come from a rich family, instead relying on a scholarship for her enrollment fees, while he was a legacy, which let him better bolster her amongst all the other students who might have given her a hard time for her lower-class background. Plus, an amount of students did like the two on their own merits anyways, which sure helped when Amber was outed and she had to confront her dad. George was the one who finally let the two know they both liked each other, as he could see what the two didn't. It's possible that until then, Amber and Vince might have been the only people in the school who didn't know the two were destined to be in a relationship. Over Christmas break, Amber and Vince finally kissed and started dating. Amber and Vince, as I mentioned in the intro, were created on the message boards for the comic Pride High by Tommy Roddy. There you could create your own students and they might appear in the comic later. They actually eventually did appear in the comic, in the issue just prior to the site going down, likely permanently, as the last 2 issues haven't found their way into print yet, if ever. I plan to move the characters into a different continuity, hence why I didn't even mention the name of the high school in these bios. Said school's Poseidon Preparatory Academy for Heroic Youth, by the way. I might just have the characters as they are be plucked from that reality and into a new one, possibly never mentioning the school by name, but knowing that they were once from somewhere else. Here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. And now we have Supertrans woman, real name Vivica Jackson, pronouns are she, her. Vivica is an African-American trans woman with an unrevealed sexuality. She has a magical gem which grants her the ability of telekinesis, which she can use normally, but also has a staff which she built that can concentrate that energy to control telekinetic bursts. Said staff is telescoping and can become small enough to be basically invisible when stored in her costume when not needed. To aid in the use of her staff, she has a green belt in Bojutsu. Vivica is also an inventor, creating devices such as one that can view people as they look through another universe's eyes, and by this I mean she can see comic characters as they were drawn by their original creators, but she sees it as tapping into another universe's perceptions. And she also has a watch that can track energies from other universes, which helps her find those who've hopped dimensional barriers, and as I mentioned, she also made herself that staff. Before her superhero career, Vivica was a civil rights activist, and one rally she was at was disrupted by a supervillain. A superhero did intervene and the two fought, a magical gem falling from the villain's pouch. Vivica picked it up and immediately felt its power, pocketing it and trying to give it no indication that she found it. The hero let her go on her way, and to this day she's not sure if he might have known that she had the gem all along. Vivica secured the gem on a sash belt and created a superhero costume. While not wearing the colors to indicate her trans identity, she still called herself Super Trans Woman in order to fight for good while being a hero the trans community could look up to. Originally, Vivica operated in the Deviant Universe, however an incident that threatened multiple universes had her eventually wind up leaving her homeworld, not able to return. However, she found a new, quite similar reality to call home. Super Trans Woman was created as a main character for when I played DC Universe Online. When I decided to create stories in the Deviant Universe, I brought in Flamethrower. Super Trans Woman was one of the characters I decided was an already established character in that universe. Then, when the Deviant Universe announced it was ending, I had a story that caused my characters for the world need to leave, and they went to another universe, which was the successor to the Deviant Universe called the Vigilance Project. Really, these characters created in this regard are almost an auxiliary protectors team, but I'll want to name them something to call their own. Here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. Next is Xeno, real name Sheree Murphy, pronouns are they, them. They're a mixed-race, non-binary person with an unrevealed sexuality. Sheree has the ability to heal others as well as a healing factor themselves. They're also an empath and have the ability to fly. Sheree is an accomplished negotiator and mediator. While the source of Xeno's powers haven't been revealed, they've said that originally they didn't try to be a superhero. Xeno originally volunteered at the hospital, healing anyone who came in free of charge. However, the insurance and drug companies didn't like this and were able to lean on politicians to make it illegal for Sheree to use their powers in such a way. Feeling cornered, Sheree put on a costume and adopted a superhero identity in order to help people from outside the law. Originally, they intended to simply approach hurt people on the street as well as volunteer at shelters, but were soon approached by a new local superhero, Super Trans Woman, who wanted to pool resources. Soon joined by Transor and Bohorn, both of whom you'll see later, they were part of an unofficial superhero team. However, they don't like to fight themselves, preferring to meditate while the others are sparring. That's not to say Xeno is unable to fight, nor that they haven't had to get physical from time to time, but they try to avoid such things. When the event happened that took them to another universe, Sheree knew that it meant the laws forbidding them from working in hospitals weren't around, but was burned by that process, knowing full well that they could be written into the new universe too, so the Xeno identity is maintained. Xeno has revealed that politically they're an anarcho-communist, though it's not been revealed what their allies' political leanings are. They've been shown to have the desire to talk down a villain even when forced to fight them in gladiatorial combat. They've offered to heal psychological trauma, which means their abilities don't just extend to physical aid, and they've even promised to regrow an individual's lost limbs, which implies heavy reconstructive abilities. Xeno's an odd one to me. Yes, I created them, but the idea of a superhero who's basically a medic in the field is interesting. I do like the idea of a character whose entire thing is de-escalation, a superhero who doesn't jump into a fight at a moment's notice. Their name is kind of a play on two aspects that are both referencing how they're an other to society. One is their non-binary identity and also their mixed-race background, but the other is that they actively shun the whole mentality that might makes right, that violence is the answer to problems. Ultimately, it's hard to write for such a character, but I guess that means I need to get better at doing it, because that's a flaw on my end. Here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. This next one is Transor, real name Ptah, pronouns are she, her. Ptah is an extraterrestrial straight trans woman. Actually hailing from KC Earth-1, she was exiled by her people some time ago. She doesn't like to talk about it, so the question of why hasn't been answered. However, it's known that she became a drifter and later befriended Bohorn, who you'll see later, before they both left their own universe and found themselves on the Earth of the Deviant Universe, where they met Flamethrower and Xeno, becoming an unofficial superhero team. Ptah doesn't see the need for a secret identity, but created a superhero persona in order to better fit with her peers. Also, the costume helps cover her mouth, which freaks out the humans. Her codename was inspired by Supertrans woman's Out and Proud name, while also alluding to the fact that, with her costume on, she looked to people like some sort of dinosaur person. While among her race she wouldn't be considered to have any powers, on Earth, Transor's strength and durability are superhuman. She also is an accomplished hand-to-hand fighter and carries weapons from her people's culture that resemble Tonfa. Ptah is relatively good at speaking English, but still speaks in a stilted manner. Her personality tends to be no-nonsense, and she is generally the first among her team to conclude that violence is the answer. While she considers Earth her home now, it's really the company of her unofficial team, and so when she had to leave the Deviant Universe and make a home in a new one, she found it easy to adjust. Transor was created when I tried Champions Online, and she was my primary character. Obviously, when I played such things, I liked to make characters who, even from their name, you could tell they were trans, but I never wanted to play as myself, though you'll hear more about why later. Originally, I included her in a page of Care Bear Comics Presents as one of the characters Tempora saw when you looked at KC Earth 1, therefore I needed that to be reflected in her backstory when I included her in the Deviant Universe, hence she has that awkward universe-hopping backstory. But the idea is that she and Bohorn coming from another universe is what inspired Supertrans woman to invent her devices involving alternate universes. Here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. Now we have Bohorn, real name Montesh Creole, pronouns are he, him. He's an extraterrestrial trans man with an unrevealed sexuality. His planet dying due to environmental collapse, Montesh is part of a critically endangered extraterrestrial species. Because the survivors of his people are so few in number and they know they must focus on reproduction in order to survive, he was branded as a traitor to his kind simply for being who he is. Shunned from his people, he found himself alone, a drifter and a panhandler, when he encountered Ptah. They bonded over the fact that both were exiles from their own culture, and only Montesh has been able to get Ptah to open up about her past, though he's sworn he won't talk about it to others. The two eventually found themselves in not only a new universe, but on Earth, which was alien to them. However, they found allies in Supertrans woman and Xeno, becoming an unofficial superhero team. Still, Montesh keeps one eye on the door, so to speak. He's already had to flee one planet, so he feels it's only time before he has to do so again. He hopes he can make Earth his home, but considering that by now he's already fled one version, he's not so sure. Montesh, like Ptah, did decide to create a superhero codename for himself, though he considers it pointless due to how different he looks, and unlike Ptah, he can't put on a mask to keep the humans from being scared of him. He has a problem that people see him as a devil, and as such he's grateful for his role in the team, for he'll be the least visible member. Bohorn is a skilled archer, preferring to attack from a distance. His body naturally will grow spikes from itself rather quickly, and he'll break off the straight ones to use as arrows. While his people can also excrete a glossy substance from their bodies that'll harden instantly to make their skin as hard as steel, this constricts his movement, so he doesn't use it as much. Unlike Transor, Bohorn has found it quite difficult to learn English. He always carries a translation dictionary with him, speaking slowly and with broken English. He tries to play it off as having a hard time understanding human tongues, but there may be more to that. It's possible that, since he's lost two worlds, he's not willing to make the commitment to learning a new language, if it's entirely likely that this home will disappear as well. Bohorn was a secondary character I made for Champions Online. I only created a hero because Champions doesn't have a villain side to play on. Ultimately, I didn't use him much. Heck, I didn't play the game much since RPGs aren't my thing, and I was more used to DC Universe Online when I did play an MMO. I still obviously like the character enough to port him over to the Deviant Universe and later the Vigilance Project, though. He's one of those who, after hearing the backstory, you kind of want to give a hug, though. Here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. Lastly, we have Supertrans, real name Ave Messer, pronouns are she, her. You might have been able to tell, Supertrans is just me with superpowers. In fact, the whole outfit she's wearing is something I'd put together that I could wear. Hence, so little yellow, despite it being my favorite color, since it washes me out due to my blonde hair and pale skin. Though, when I colored her for the stories, a coloring I continued for this image, I made the hair much lighter and failed to realize that my eyes are actually gray. I mean, sometimes they look blue, sometimes they look green, sometimes they look completely gray, you know, it's hard to tell their color sometimes. But anyways, her backstory. She's a lesbian trans woman from Redding, California. Due to an act of kindness, she was entrusted by a couple extra-dimensional beings with a ring that gave her superpowers, said powers being basically one-to-one with Superman. The beings were originally intending to give the ring to someone who was highly worthy, somebody truly altruistic and noble, but had difficulty due to said people often being too humble to accept such power, or other circumstances, and were soon running to the end of the time they could spend in the dimension, setting up one last test of character, to give the ring to the first person who helped out their human body when it looked like it was in trouble. Could have been anyone who got the ring, actually. The version of me in the story was unsure about herself, whether she was worthy, and hoped she was at least a decent choice. Factor in my very real fear of heights, and that did make things a bit dicey, even using the powers to their full potential. Now, I will have spoilers for issue 27 of Almighty Protectors here, where the team went to her world, so if you care about such things, maybe click away until you read it. Or I'll hopefully remember to put up a timestamp to go to. Anyways, when she met the Protectors who had come to her world chasing a team of supervillains led by the member of the team who had been masquerading as a hero in the Protectors for some time, Supertrans met her end, painfully and violently. It was the Protectors' first complete loss, and they were defeated as well, left alive because the villains wanted them to see the devastation caused because they were allowed to run rampant. As the Protectors left to still pursue the villains and to recover from such a defeat, Supertrans's body was recovered by the very beings who gave her the ring, bemoaning their own failure in finding a proper wielder of the power and the fact that they got her killed. They retreated to do better research about who to give the ring to. Supertrans was absolutely an attempt to be able to cosplay as one of my characters, but in the end I just couldn't continue with her. Not only do I really care little about writing a self-insert as any sort of main character, but I find myself so boring that I couldn't really go anywhere with it. Besides, I could have very easily run into Mary Sue territory. Also, I'm not the hero type, since in real life I freeze up in stressful situations and have an immense aversion to pain. But I still have that ring out in the wild in my comics, which means it can still be given to a character who might actually be worthy. I have some ideas. Probably won't call that character Supertrans though, since there's no reason to have anything about me as a legacy character. And here are the finished inks. And this is a fully colored image. And so that was the final character introductions video. I hope you enjoyed seeing all those characters happen. Like I was saying, next video is going to be... next video involving character introductions is instead going to be story-oriented. And I don't know when it'll be. This one's taken a bit for me to do, and I'm trying to do NaNoWriMo this month, so it's possible I may be trying to do more quick one-and-done videos for a little bit. I also want to do some crossovers, but I don't know who wants to cross over with me because I'm not necessarily, you know... I have 11 subscribers at the time I'm recording this. But I did want to say that there is a YouTube video that involves one of my characters. Hopefully I can put up on the screen now a picture that was done of one of my characters. You've not seen him on this channel yet. Maybe up in this corner. I hope it's up in this corner. The iCard. I'll put a little link to that video. It's Dempsey J Illustrations had a community redraw, and redrew one of my characters in it. The first character in that video, but check it all out. It's all good art. Now, you may be interested. It's just like, well, that's his art. What does mine look like? Well, I don't know why I'm doing the hand thing. It's not like it's much of anything, but there's my my drawing of the character, Shaitan. Sorry for the cough. He's a villain that I've used before, and I do intend to use more. But the problem is, one of his major stories that Care Bear Comics Unlimited has actually gone pretty far past by now, has not actually been done. It's a big crossover story, and it's just like, well, I don't really want to use him until I've told that, because it's what he was created for. But regardless, I'll see you next time for the next video. Of course, there's a whole YouTuber thing. If you wanna like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And I often say this, but as I mentioned on my just previous video, I'm not gonna say that this is a requirement, because I realize that's not so nice of a thing to say. So instead, I'm going to say that I really hope you have a good day.